Hey, how's it going, folks? So, I wanted to discuss a couple of inattentive ADHD common slash not so uncommon symptoms, and a couple of remedies of what we can do in order to help that out. Because, like I've stated many times before, having inattentive ADHD brings forth with it rare details, or rather, details that differ from our hyperactive and combined type counterparts. And that's not to say that combined types can't relate to this, and same goes for the pure hyperactives. But generally speaking, from the people I've worked with, and symptoms even for myself, these are quite common for those of us with inattentive ADHD. So, these are 10 points I'm going to discuss of common occurrences of difficulty that occur to those of us with inattentive ADHD, and we're also going to talk about a couple of remedies, things we can do in order to help ourselves out. So let's dive on into it. So the first point is doing things in an order that is dependent upon how good slash bad something feels to us, and then forgetting to do the rest slash some of the things we need to do. So this has to do with our lower reward system. Just think of a chore you have to do, something physical. You might be downstairs cleaning up something, or upstairs, or wherever, someone in your house, you're cleaning up something, and you're deciding for yourself what you have to do first, and then you might go do something that feels a little light, feels better than the rest first, or for the first couple of things, and then you might disregard to do the things you need to do that are a bit more difficult to do. And then that's fine and all, but unfortunately, sometimes we can forget. By putting off a couple of things and thinking that we're going to remember to do everything, for the most part, we might forget. We have to keep in mind that inattentive ADHD is an issue with inattention. And with that comes a problem sometimes with short-term memory and us not being able to remember things that we have to do. So in the middle of us doing the thing we've chosen to do first that feels less uncomfortable than the rest, we might do the first or second thing, and then we might forget the third and fourth and fifth altogether. So a lot of the time, we might think that we're going to remember everything we need to do. But what we should do, especially if it's something that's a long process, is we should use technology. What do I mean by that? Let's use our phone. Open up an app and write down the different steps of what you need to do. That way you won't forget. And you can even rearrange the order at that point. In terms of difficulty, in terms of comfort slash uncomfort level. And then that way you can hopefully remember. The reason I mentioned this point is because this is something that occurred to me quite often. I'd be doing something, I'd have maybe a list of 5 major things to do, and I would choose the first thing to do, that constant brain-mind battle of, okay, what should I do first? This or that, and then boom, you just go with, whatever feels less uncomfortable. And then when you're doing that, sometimes you get so into that and you hyper-focus that you completely forget about the next thing you have to do, or you spend too much time doing it. So what's helped me out is having a visual list on my phone app, a notepad app, whatever. Write down the things you need to do. That way you can rearrange order and not forget of the things that you have to do. And then also allocate a proper amount of time for each thing. Which leads me to the next point. Point number 2. Underestimating slash overestimating time. This is really common for a lot of us with inattentive ADHD, especially those of us who have the perceiver function and are not too balanced out. What I mean by this is sometimes perceivers have difficulty estimating how long something's going to take because we just improv a lot of the time and just go based off the feel or based off the necessity of the circumstance or scenario that we're in. So it's a difficulty I've had with my inattentive ADHD is underestimating and overestimating time. I feel in my mind that something might take a certain amount of time, and that's not how long it takes. And this puts me at risk for being late to something else. So what I've learned to do in order to improve myself is that I have made a mental note. When I'm going somewhere or doing something, I will see how long it takes. I'll keep the mindset, or I'll keep in mind rather, that I'm timing myself. Let's say I start getting ready, and then I'll look at the clock. I'll be like, okay, it's fill a blank o'clock right now. And then boom, from the time I start getting ready to the time I'm in the car ready to go, then I look at the time again. I'm like, all right. So it takes me about this amount of minutes in order to do this, or this amount of hours in order to do that. So if this is not something you do already, I'd recommend to start noting how long it takes you to do certain things, especially things that are of importance in terms of perhaps getting ready, preparing something, whether it be for the family, for work, or anything else important in your life. So that way we won't underestimate or overestimate time, and we will arrive on time more frequently. And we won't be as stressed out pulling all-nighters and cramming projects and all the classic inattentive ADHD difficulties that a lot of us probably know all too well. So, point number 3, saying/talking too much when responding to something. Now, this is an area where sometimes intuitives have a pretty big difficulty because we have a lot we can say from our mind that we delve into, especially if we have that perceiver function. Yeah, we got quite a bit of metaphors we can throw out there. And that's not to say that the other functions can either, but from what I've noticed, at least in my surroundings with some of the people I worked with, those of us that are intuitive perceivers, yeah, we can go pretty deep in the analysis. And yeah, it can take quite a while for us to get to a point where we're talking. So, since we have inattentive ADHD, unfortunately, what can happen is when we're having a conversation with somebody, it's our turn to talk in the conversation, and then boom, we just go really in depth into something with vivid detail. And depending on your cognitive functions, it might come off in different sorts of ways, and depending on our mood as well. But the point I'm trying to make is that sometimes we share or say way too much, when in reality, what was asked of us, could have taken maybe a few sentences to answer. So if this is not something you were aware of, or if this is something that you do and you weren't aware of it, perhaps something to work on, making it a habit to say what you need to say, not in an extremely short, blunt manner either, but in a more adequate length, and not to go really off the deep end into a subject matter when the other person's just staring at us like, when are they going to stop talking? I need to leave. Yeah, because it's happened to some of us. we say too much sometimes, and the other person doesn't want to be rude and stop us because we seem so passionate about what we're talking about. But yeah, we need to monitor how much we say. I understand some of us are very passionate, and that's fine. I am the first one to admit that, yeah, I've done this a bunch of times. I'm very passionate about quite a bit of things, especially in terms of research in ADHD and the social sciences and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, but I've made it a habit to monitor how much I'm saying when I'm talking so I don't hog up too much of the conversation. So, if this is something you have difficulty with as well, just a heads up to be aware of that and to work on that if that's an issue for you. Next point number 4, correlating to point number 3, going off on a random thought branch in a conversation and not knowing what you were previously talking about, or what point was even being made. Now, this is classic ADHD, and in this scenario, also very inattentive ADHD. You're having a conversation, and in this case, you might be going off on something because you're passionate, or you might be stimulated by the idea of what you're talking about, and then boom, the mind jumps into like 3 different thought branches. We're talking, we're a passionate conversation, and then boom, we're like, wait a minute, what were we talking about, or what was I talking about? Was I the one making the point? Wait a minute, what if I'm supposed to be considerate to the other person and I don't? So all these things can happen. You can get lost in the conversation and not know whether it's even your turn to be talking to an extent, or whether you're the one that started the subject matter, and then what ends up happening sometimes is you forget the main point of which you were going to make, or something important is forgotten upon in the conversation, which is pretty difficult too if you have ADHD, because then what happens is sometimes you want to speak right away because you don't want to forget what it is that you have to say. So for this, I would recommend supplements, particularly for the memory aspect of it. But going back to the point four, that is being aware of where we're at in the conversation. So what I do to help myself out is I will make a mental note. I'll use, maybe one word to give me a clue as to what I was talking about. While the other person's talking, I'll be paying attention, but then I'll make a mental note to myself. I'll say it inwardly, and then that word will be a hint as to what we were talking about. Let's say we're talking about, I don't know, golf. You just put that. Golf, gonna go to a country club, whatever. Any sort of thing that will help you remember that that's what you're talking about. And if you need to take someone somewhere or do some kind of favor and that's what you're talking about, then perhaps use a phrase that reminds you of that. We all got different indicators and different things that can help us remind us of things. So I would recommend that. And if that's like a little too difficult to do, try to monitor where your thoughts are going as you're talking and make sure that you don't drift off into another subject matter too frequently, or perhaps like too frequently enough that you don't notice. So something that's helped me stay on topic when I'm talking, because my cognitive functions can go all over the place when I'm talking about something. So what's helped me out is jumping to another subject matter when I'm talking to someone. Or I'll say, quick side note, and then I'll bring up the whatever it is I need to bring up. And then boom, I'll tell the person as you were saying, and boom, the conversation continues. And that way I'm not completely lost in the conversation. So try some of those things. They might help you out. Just because being lost in that thought branch of a conversation, not knowing where you were originally, it can be a bit embarrassing, quite annoying, and just, it just kills the conversation sometimes, but something to work on if you have an issue with it. Point number 5, not being prepared for a big event once the day comes. So this is a really common thing amongst a lot of inattentive types, that when there's a big event coming, like a job interview or a day where you have a really big deadline, you have a lot of things to finish, that we might leave things until the last minute. And this has to do with the lack of reward system and the need to stimulate the mind. But what I want to focus on for this point is that, let's say we have a big job interview, or we have to go somewhere and bring a lot of stuff because we're responsible for fill in the blank. What really helps out, and what's really helped me out, is leaving everything prepared the night before, including going and putting gas in the car. Don't kid yourself. You're telling yourself, hey, I'll put gas tomorrow. I'll make sure to do everything properly on time. More times than not, you're not going to have enough time, and then you're going to get into the car because you might forget that you haven't put gas the day of as you're going. You're like, okay, I did everything early, let's go. And then boom, you look at the car, and it's on empty. You're like, oh crap, here we go. And then you got to drive 2 miles, 200 miles an hour flying off, and it's stressful. So don't do that. So what I would recommend is to leave everything ready the night before. Make it extremely easy for yourself. So once you get up, ideally on time, you'll be able to just get ready and everything will be smooth, because the night before, or 2 nights before, if you want to be slick, you leave everything ready. The clothes are ironed, everything's ready to go. You got the food, the props, whatever it is you're bringing, everything's there ready to go. Perhaps leaving it by the door, maybe leaving it in the garage, in the car, something like that. That way, when you get up the next day, you got less work and less things to worry about, and you can just get ready and get on your merry way. So that's what's helped me out. And if it's something of an assignment or some deadline you have to bring forth the next day, yeah, make sure not to leave that to the last day. Perhaps maybe the third or second to last day, if you're pushing it. But yeah, it's really stressful and it's not good on the mind. So leave everything ready the night before. I know it's not stimulating, it's not fun, but it's something that's going to really benefit you and make a lot of difference, and especially in you being punctual and being on time and prepared and not stressed and arriving to the get together. A lot of us have really driven really fast on the freeway and on the road, just going nuts trying to make it on time to somewhere. Having an attentive ADHD is no joke, but we can certainly make it easier on ourselves. So give that a go. Give that a try if that's an issue for you. It's certainly helped me out, and I'm pretty sure it can help a lot of you guys out too. Point 6, avoiding things/people of importance because of concern that you might end up feeling bad. So, this has to do a lot with our low reward system, and sometimes we don't got tolerance for things. Just because, having low dopamine, serotonin, and the rest of the neurotransmitters we have lower levels of, particularly now focusing on the lower reward system, we might not feel too good, and it's easier for us to feel kind of bummed out and to have less energy and kind of seem like the downers, so to speak. So a good checklist that I do for myself that I would recommend some of you to do as well is first on that checklist would be ask yourself, how do I feel physically? How do I feel emotionally? And how do I feel mentally? You have to look and you have to be the judge of whether those components of yourself are good or good enough for you to go to the place you're going to. I know a lot of the time we have to push ourselves. It's life. And we have to do our responsibilities and complete the things that we have to do. But for those things that are a bit more optional, we have to keep ourselves on check. It's great to keep our word to people we've made promises to, but at the same time, we shouldn't have to push ourselves too much if we're not at the right place, physically, emotionally, and mentally. We need to be careful of that and be mindful of ourselves. And the second thing on the checklist is I would ask is that I eat and sleep well. That's super important. Because for a lot of us with inattentive ADHD, if we don't eat and sleep enough or eat and sleep well, we're going to be in a crummy, terrible mood, man. I've been around people with inattentive ADHD who seem like zombies when they go out to places when they haven't eaten and slept enough. And some of them are really irritable. I myself had issues with this too. This is something people with inattentive ADHD have issues with. So we have to keep ourselves on check. What I do if this happens is I make sure to take a nap before I have to go somewhere. I make sure to supplement with collagen. And if you have an issue with the mood, a supplement, L-theanine, would be helpful to boost up serotonin. And another supplement, N-acetyltyrosine, would perhaps be helpful for you for lifting up dopamine and norepinephrine. That way you got your mood up with L-theanine helping out serotonin, and you got your motivation and focus up with N-acetyltyrosine helping out your dopamine and norepinephrine levels, and collagen helping your body feel relaxed and energized and ready to go. So we got to take care of ourselves. And then the third point on that checklist would be asking myself, has or will my rejection-sensitive dysphoria be affected? You have to know, or if you don't know, start reflecting upon what is it that makes you feel the worst when you go somewhere. Is it because of you, or is it because of those around you, or the circumstances or details of the place that you're at? Rejection-sensitive dysphoria is a really big subject matter when it comes to ADHD. If you don't know what it is, I have a video on rejection-sensitive dysphoria you might want to check out. It has to do with the fact that a lot of us with ADHD, when rejection-sensitive dysphoria is affected, we feel a very, very immense sense of rejection. Like when someone didn't come through for us, we ask ourselves, how could they do that? We would never do that to them. How can they let us down? Or when we feel like we've let somebody down. And it feels horrible for a lot of us. So find out about rejection-sensitive dysphoria if you haven't done so already. I have a video that you might want to check out that might be of some help for you for that. And there's also plenty of other videos here on YouTube that are also quite helpful and talk about rejection-sensitive dysphoria as well. So know yourself and also check up on yourself to see how you're doing. That way, you'll have a better understanding of whether you should go somewhere or do something or not. Because I know sometimes we got to push ourselves, but there's some times where, some of us do stuff, we push ourselves when we don't have to. So be wise and mindful, but at the same time, be considerate of others, but also be considerate of yourself. You also matter. Point number 7. Taking on too much responsibility because of not asking others for help. This is one that I have had quite an issue with as well. Due to rejection-sensitive dysphoria and being shunned and rejected in so many different ways growing up because of my undiagnosed inattentive ADHD, I didn't like asking people for help. I remember being made fun of asking people for help when I was young. I remember teachers yelling at me and getting frustrated that I couldn't understand stuff. As a child, it certainly gave me anxiousness. I didn't want to ask for help because I felt bad asking for help with things that everybody else understood. So I had to learn to overcome that. Once I found out my issues, so I had to learn how to overcome that. And thankfully, in my late teens, I started work on it more and more. And then once I got my diagnosis of inattentive ADHD in my mid-20s, then I became really introspective about it. And then I was able to overcome a lot of that and thankfully ask for help more so when I needed it. So a lot of us, though, still struggle in this area, and it might seem embarrassing sometimes to ask for help for stuff, but we have to understand that people are considerate. Once we get our rejection-sensitive dysphoria on check, we're going to see that it's not so difficult to ask other people for help, and some other people really do want to help us out. So try not to put everything on your shoulders. It's quite the burden, and it's really tough for you to have to do a lot of stuff for yourself. So know who to ask for help and know when to ask for help. There's a lot of good people out there. For a long time, growing up with an undiagnosed condition like inattentive ADHD, and with the rough experiences I had when I was younger, I didn't think there was people willing enough to help me out in a variety of things. But the older I got and the more I discovered my rejection-sensitive dysphoria and also a lot of the emotional trauma I had from my past life growing up, I learned to overcome a lot of that stuff and see more of a variety in life and from people. So for those of you who are similar to myself and had it pretty rough in some areas growing up and, feel ashamed for asking for help or feel like you're going to feel horrible if the person says no, take it step by step. And understand that some people want to help you out, and some people will help you out. It's okay to ask for help. We're in this together. We're human beings. And in this instance, it makes us even closer because we have ADHD. You never know. Maybe the person you're asking for help might have ADHD as well. And they understand. They'll help you out. But regardless, though, don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it. Because it's really tough to live life thinking that you need to do everything for yourself. So it's okay to ask for help sometimes. Sometimes we really need it. Next point, missing important details when being instructed at work or school /etc. So because of having inattentive ADHD, there's going to be times where we unconsciously, not on purpose, will miss information that's being thrown at us. If somebody's talking or telling us something and we get distracted for whatever reason, we might miss a couple of points or the entire point of details of which they are telling us. So What you have to do is, if you're working with somebody at work or at school, ask a friend or a colleague for help, or sometimes perhaps to repeat what the instructor, your boss, your other colleague says if you need verification, just to make sure you got all the information down. And also, don't be afraid to talk about your condition. With the colleagues I have and the people that know me, they know I have inattentive ADHD. So I'm very comfortable with that, but that's because that's who I am. Some other people might not be as comfortable letting other people know, but it's really helpful. You'd be surprised how considerate people can be. There's some people, unfortunately, who don't believe ADHD exists, but hey, you know what I mean? We're working on that. Working on getting the information out there more so on ADHD. But there's a lot of people who believe ADHD is a condition and it affects people. So ask for help and work with the right people that are going to be understanding of you. And if unfortunately you're in a place where that's not really going down, if you have the choice to go somewhere else, you can do that. But be wise about that and think and plan accordingly. So what I do is that, whether it be at work, I knew sometimes I would miss details. Thankfully, because of my medication and supplements, my mind was able to focus a whole lot better. But there were some days where I still needed some assistance. So if anytime I didn't understand something, or I didn't get the information, or might have dozed off, I just asked the person next to me, hey, what did the instructor say about this? Or can I see your notes? Can I take a picture of your notes? Whatever it is. So you'd be surprised. People are really chill most of the time, and yeah, they'll help you out. So it's okay for us to ask, hey, did I miss something? Yeah, because we have a condition that gives us difficulty with that. And legally, your place of work cannot discriminate against you because of a condition. So let the people you're working with know that you have a condition or you have difficulty with that, and that sometimes you might need to ask something twice. So cut me some slack. Okay, so that shouldn't be all that difficult, and I hope that majority of you are working at a place where you can do this, because it's really important for ADHD to be considered from those who are perhaps in charge of us, or our bosses, and etc., etc. But there you have it. Point number 9: saying "huh" when somebody tells you something, only to interrupt them almost immediately to tell them that you got what they were saying. So this is something I've seen in a lot of people I worked with inattentive ADHD. Something I actually used to do when I was a child. Thankfully, I got this on check because I thought it was quite annoying. I became aware of it, and then I was like, no, I need to stop doing this. So there you go. But now I encounter some people who still do it. So this is something to perhaps work on, because there's some people who really get irked by this out there. So if you want to help yourself out with this, what you can do is, when somebody tells you something, since we have issues sometimes processing information because of how it sounds, and not to mention the condition itself, give it a few seconds. Don't just say, huh, what, right away. Give it a few seconds. Let the statement of which the person talking to you said make sense of it, let your brain get it, and then continue the conversation. You don't have to answer stuff right away all the time. So in order to avoid saying, huh, what, and making the person repeat themselves, just give it a few seconds. Internalize what they just said. If you really didn't hear what they said, then yeah, ask them to repeat themselves. Or if it was hard to decipher what they were saying, ask for clarification. But if they're speaking to you in a manner of which is easy to understand, the volume's good, the message is clear, and you're still saying, huh, well, maybe you might want to wait a few seconds before you say what, huh, before you repeat yourself. Because this is something that I've been told, and I've also seen myself, is an issue with some of us with inattentive ADHD. So give it a few seconds. Conversation is not a race, and we need to remember that. Give it a few seconds to decipher, deconstruct what they said, and then go on your merry way and keep the conversation going. And then if after that you still don't know, you can't decipher what they said, well then yeah, ask them to repeat themselves. But there you have it. And the final point, point 10, making it difficult for yourself to go to sleep by watching/doing something you know will be difficult to stop. So what happens with this? We want to stimulate the mind. For a lot of us with inattentive ADHD, we have sleep problems. We can't just fall asleep. We need to go through our procedure of trying to go to sleep. So what we do is we end up watching a show, a video or something, and then boom, we're hooked on that video or that show. And then the cliffhanger on the show just leaves us hanging. We're like, oh, we have to find out what happens next. Maybe just a few minutes, and then we start watching the show, and then boom, a whole another episode goes, and bam, we have compromised our sleep. So I know it's really entertaining or whatever, but when you're going to go to sleep, if you watch something before you go to sleep, because I know a lot of people with ADHD need to watch something before they go to sleep. Be careful what you watch, or be careful what you see or what you do, because this could keep you entertained and keep the mind stimulated that you're not going to go to sleep right away. You're going to want to stay up to keep watching it. Now, when it comes to the phone, research has shown that the blue light that comes from the phone, it basically tells your brain to stay awake. So being in brightly lit places before you go to bed is not recommended. So if you're going to watch something, watch a show that you've seen a bunch of times already, that you just, your feel-good show, whatever it may be. Have that on, a show that you've already seen, you know what's going to happen. If you turn it off, it's going to be okay, because you already know what happened. Have the show on. Have everything else ready to go. So once you turn off the TV or whatever it is, you can just go to sleep. And that way your sleep is not going to be compromised. Now, if it's a hobby or something you're doing, be selective. And this is where the discipline has to come in. And you got to stop yourself from starting something you know you're not going to be able to finish, or something you know you're not going to be able to stop doing, rather. So be wise about that. Give yourself, or allocate perhaps 45 minutes to get ready to go to sleep. I give myself about 45 minutes when I know I gotta go to sleep, because I know I gotta brush the teeth, wash the face, do etc., and then get all the essentials ready for the next day so I'm not in a rush. And then, boom, once you're ready to go to bed, you have all your stuff ready. I might watch a show maybe for 5 minutes, something nostalgia-based that just makes me feel relaxed, happy. Watch the show maybe for 5 minutes, and I was like, all right, I feel good now. I'll take my sleep supplement regimen. Prior to this, I will have taken it maybe 20, 30 minutes before. So, boom, once I get into bed, have the show on, put it on for a few minutes, and then once I feel the supplements kick in, I'm like, boom, it's time to go to sleep. And then I just knock out. So I try to avoid making it difficult for myself to go to sleep. And I try to make it as easy as possible for myself to go to sleep when I need to. Because you got to keep in mind, we have to keep in mind, ADHD, there's a lot of lack of stimulation in the brain. So whatever starts stimulating the brain is going to be very difficult to stop. So we got to be mindful of ourselves so we don't compromise our time. And especially our sleep time, which is so critically important for those of us with ADHD. So that is the video for today. I hope you've learned a thing or two and can apply some of these things into some of these symptoms that perhaps you or somebody you know has difficulty with. This is Wilhelm, your ADHD comrade, over and out. Take it easy.